Okay, so this is a 1 year update. So for the most part, I don't think too much has changed from the last time that I made a video. So this video is going to be more about the changes that I've made and sort of things that I've realised recently, because I feel like that's a lot more important and a lot more impactful than how much more I can understand of watching YouTube, you know? The main big thing that has been going on the last, I'm going to say month or 2 months, is that I had a bit of a perspective change. So I mentioned in the last video that I had been tracking my immersion hours in this notebook, and I had been doing it for a month or two, and that I enjoyed doing it. For the first while of doing that, it was good to see how much I was doing a day, and it was kind of more motivating. But what started happening for the last 2 months, month or two, is that I realized I was doing things not for the sake of getting immersion and improving. I was doing things for the sake of being able to write down a higher number at the end of the day, which is ridiculous. There were times I would opt for listening to a podcast on my phone instead of watching, say, someone's Instagram story. Like, I follow a lot of German people on Instagram, so it would be a similar amount of speaking involved in both things. But I was opting for listening to the podcast, even if I would have preferred to watch the Instagram story, because I could track the podcast time. So at the end of the day, the 2 minutes listening to the podcast would go towards my time, but 2 minutes on Instagram, like, technically wouldn't. So my thinking was, I only want to do things that I can track. In the evenings, after I'd filled out all the hours and things that I had done that day, I would have about 20 minutes before I would actually go to bed. And in that time, I could have continued listening to a podcast, but I found myself thinking, there's no point, because I've already put my hours in for the day, therefore this doesn't count, which makes no sense. Once I realised that I had been doing this, I thought that's not okay, you know, that's the wrong way to think about it. So I decided to take a step back for a few days and think about what was I doing, what did I want to do. And during that time, I realised that I was in this mental bubble of thinking everything had to be about German all the time. That's what my main goal was. That was my number one priority. So I realised that because all of my mental energy was spent thinking about German and doing things in German, I wasn't even leaving myself time to consider what else I could be doing. So once I took a step back and I realised that, I took some time to kind of reevaluate my relationship with why I was learning German and how much time should I reasonably be spending with it. And the more time that I spent thinking about why I was learning German and why I had put so much pressure on myself to get it done quickly, was because in my mind, if I didn't get to, X level, whatever fluent, whatever I considered that to be, if I didn't get to that level in, say, 2 years, then it was no longer impressive. And the more I thought about that, the more I realised, realistically, no one's gonna care. Maybe for the first 10 minutes of meeting someone, they'll be impressed that you did it in, a year and a half, 2 years, and you got to a very good level. Sure, whatever. But they're not gonna care. Genuinely, they're not gonna care. So it was really just me that was caring so much about getting it done quickly. So once I realised that, I was able to actually let it go. I was thinking, okay, there's no time limit. I'm the only one that's putting a time limit on myself, and that's what's making me not enjoy this. That's what's making this into essentially a numbers game. So I decided to kind of chill out for 2 days. If I watched something in German, cool. If I didn't, cool. And in those 2 days, I also decided that it would be beneficial, I think, to kind of get back to basics, because I realized I'd gotten too into the intricacies of what was the best way to immerse, what was the best, things to do on Anki, all this kind of stuff, and it's too into like the nitty-gritty things, and realistically they don't matter as much. So to do this, I decided that I would take some time and reread some AJATT articles, because the mindset that I was in after I read through the table of contents for the first time, it was very, I don't know how to describe it, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this that have had a similar experience with kind of discovering AJATT or MIA or whichever one you find first. So for anyone who hasn't watched my first video, it's 40 minutes, it's ridiculously long, no need to watch it. But I found AJATT after 8 months of trying to learn German. And this was 8 months of doing a lot of research about how to learn a language. And I read, all the, cliche books of Fluent in 3 months and Fluent Forever, all this stuff. And I was still so confused about how people were actually learning these languages in presumably such a short time. So when I came across AJATT, I was like, oh my god, this is it. This makes sense. This is the thing that I've been looking for, and this is what fits me. So I thought that going back and rereading some AJATT articles would help put me back in like a better state of mind. And it really did, honestly. I found one post that I actually hadn't read before. It was a text chat that he'd put up between him and a friend of his, kind of explaining AJATT and like just the whole kind of idea. And that really kind of summed everything up quite well. So that put me back in the, you know, state of mind of do as much as you can just for the sake of listening as much as you can. So that was sort of the first thing that I really wanted to talk about. I think it's the most important thing. It's the biggest change that I've made, and since doing that I've like been a lot happier. I'm not worried about how much I'm doing per day, because sometimes I would think I had done a lot and then I added up the hours and I would like, oh, it's only been 2 hours, how has it only been 2 hours? And then I would feel a bit crappy about it. But now that I've kind of taken a bit of a reset, it doesn't matter. I'm doing as much as I'm comfortably able to do, and that's fine. I know that I'm making progress. I can see that I'm making progress. So taking all this pressure off myself has really just let me enjoy things a lot more. So for the people who are wanting to get good at a language really, really quickly, I think it's worth checking why you want to do that. Like, why do you want to do it so quickly, and why do you want to get to such a high level so quickly? Is it because you need it for work, or is it just something you've decided that you need to do? So I would just say keep in mind that it doesn't need to be a race. I think that's one of the things that is perhaps not the most healthy part of this language learning community. For some people. So just something to keep in mind. Maybe other people are struggling with it a little bit. I definitely was. Anyway, so moving on. So from my experience so far, I'm estimating that it'll take me a total of 2, maybe 3 years to get to a somewhat like comfortable level. I'm saying this because during the first year, like this first year, my comprehension has really, really gone up, but I know that I haven't been doing as much as would be needed to get like properly fluent in like a year and a half, even on top of the 8 months that I had done before I found AJATT and MAA. Now I'm completely fine with that. Before, that was an issue for me. Before, I thought I need to do it in, I suppose, 18 months, because I felt, well, if Japanese is like twice as hard as a European language, what excuse do I have to not be at a very high level, or at least a comfortably fluent level, in a year and a half? But like, I don't do 7 hours of immersion a day. I don't do, 20 new cards a day. I don't even add cards every day. I'm doing what's comfortable for me, and what's comfortable for me is this pace. So at this pace, it's probably going to take me 2 years before I can somewhat comfortably speak. My level of speaking now is really not very good. I reckon that if I needed to, I could get by if I had to go live in Germany, but I would be making like a lot of mistakes, and there'd be a lot of things that I still wouldn't know how to say. So my thinking is that the next year and a half will be really closing the gap between like my comprehension and what I'm actually able to use, because I can comprehend like quite a lot. So one of the things that I started doing, I may have mentioned it before, but I've started doing it like regularly now. So I have a language exchange partner, and for the first half of our Skype calls we speak English, and for the second half she speaks German and I continue to speak English. And initially I was a bit nervous to ask someone to do this with me, like someone that wasn't my friend, because I thought they would think this is very strange and they would try and get me to speak German. And I just, like, at this stage that I'm at, like, I could if I wanted to. There would just be a lot of mistakes, and it's still very, very frustrating, and I'm just not the sort of person who gets a lot of enjoyment from doing things that are very like difficult and strenuous. I know there are people that would be at my level that would really, really enjoy speaking, but I don't. It just makes me nervous and it just makes me uncomfortable. So I'm glad that I found someone who is perfectly fine with speaking German to me while I reply to her in English. The schedule that I have at the moment with this language exchange is that we talk twice a week on Skype, and we usually talk for about 2 hours. So we talk for like an hour straight in English, and then the last hour is, half in German. So when we first started doing this, it was just an hour, so it was 30 minutes English, 30 minutes German. And at the end of the 30 minutes of German, I would be like mentally a bit tired, and I noticed it was like that for the first 2 or 3 times maybe that we spoke. But after those first couple of times, it stopped being as much of a strain, so we can talk now for the whole hour with me just listening to her in German, and it's fine. So when she's speaking German, the stuff we're talking about is fairly everyday stuff. We don't really go into very like complicated in-depth topics. So my understanding is pretty good. There's still like a lot of words that I don't understand, but through like context, like I don't get lost in the conversation. If there's something that I really don't understand and I just didn't understand the entire sentence that she said, I might like ask her to be like, could you rephrase that? But to be honest, I don't bother doing that very often because it's not a problem. I think because I'm so used to not understanding understanding things and being okay with ambiguity when I'm watching TV means that I let a lot of things slide when we're having conversations. Like there's a lot of things that I don't understand that she says, but not in the sense of not being able to understand what the conversation is about. Like there'll be words, a few phrases that I don't catch, but within the overall conversation I'm not lost. I'd say my understanding kind of ranges between like 80 and 90%, most likely leaning towards 90, but I do know there's definitely a lot of room to improve with this. Like I'm at the stage where we can comfortably have a conversation with her just speaking German and me speaking English. Like there's not really an issue with that, which is really, really good. So just by the fact that I've noticed I'm more comfortable listening to her speaking German, I noticed after talking to my friend, when my friend was speaking to me in German, is that you have to pay so much more attention when someone is talking to you as opposed to when you're watching something, because you can completely zone out when you're watching TV and it's fine. But if you zone out for like a half a second when you're actually speaking to someone and you don't know what's going on, it's embarrassing because you have to be like, sorry, I didn't know what you said there. Could you repeat it? And you just have to be on a lot more. So I noticed my attention was like a lot, it was a heightened when I was talking to my friend. So that's why I decided to try and find someone I could do that regularly with. And even during the first few conversations we had, I definitely noticed I was picking up like certain phrases because we were talking about Corona and all the different measures that were going on in Germany as opposed to in Ireland. We were talking about how we had to keep distance from each other, like social distancing. So she said that enough times in German that I picked up how they said that. So if that's something that anyone had been considering doing, I would like encourage you just to try it and see what you think. Maybe it's not for you, who knows, but I do it now because I enjoy it and it's fun just having a chat with someone every now and again, and it's also practically useful for like cultural things. So there were a few things that I had noticed through watching like vlog channels on YouTube, and I asked her about them and she properly explained everything,